Okay, we should be good now. Let's pick back up. Maybe I can splice these. Probably won't though. Not trying to do a whole lot of work with that. All right. We talked about God being the actor, okay, and He speaks as the action. His word being the source of the action. Here's something I want to say to you guys. Yahweh is the chief actor. The action that He takes in moving is going to be His word or His Torah. Always. And the space that He creates is always temple. You follow? So let's say Yahweh.
Yahweh.
Yes. Torah.
Torah.
And temple.
Temple.
Yeah, these three things are going to be behind. They're going to lurk in the background in everything that God calls people to do. And any time that God comes to live with people and interact with them, they're going to lurk in the background. They're going to be a part of it. So we have Yahweh, Torah, and temple. Yahweh is the first actor. Okay? He's the first one to act. When He acts, the mechanism, the means by which He acts is going to be Torah, His word. Okay? And then the third is He's always acting within or creating a space for temple. Always, always, always. The entire cosmos is actually a temple in Genesis. So heaven and earth are spaces that are meant to be joined in the temple. It's almost like this. Let's look at Genesis 1. We have heaven and earth being created, right? And actually, let's do it on days 1 to 3. Each day in 1 to 3 is a space. Does that make sense? Day 1 is a space. What's the space?
Is that?
It might be. It's going to be a bit abstract. Day is a space, and night is a space.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. And we correspond day 1 to day 4, because on day 4, what gets created? The inhabitants of the space. Sun for day, moon and stars for night. Right? Inhabitants live in that space. But then there's this added component. Do you want to know what the added component is? Not only is there a space that is created and inhabitants to fill that space, but there are appointed times and actions to be taken within the space by the actors. What do we call these appointed times for the things that inhabit the space in day 5? The sun, the moon, the stars. Seasons, years, moedim, times of meeting, right? So new moon festivals. When's it time for Pesach, for Passover? When's it time? These things are coded in. Do you see how the appropriate actions to be taken by the actors in space, that's Torah. That's instruction. That's how they move. These are the actions to be taken. Isn't that weird then that people would think that Torah or Scripture is just a matter of hearing things, or just a matter of sermons, or just a matter of study? Torah is first and foremost action. Can you say that? Torah is action.
Torah is action.
Yeah. So it's about action. It's about doing. Okay? Right? It's not about thinking about self-control, okay? And pretending like, well, I'll think about what it's like to keep my crackers to myself. It's about choosing not to open the cracker. I'm just kidding.
Seriously?
It's action. It's about action.
I'm just get it out the way.
Get them out, dude. Yeah, get them crackers out, bro. All right, bust out them crackers. All right. But this holds for day 2. Let's think about this. What's the space created on day 2?
Sky and the water.
Yes.
Water,
The sky and the water. Those 2 spaces, right? All right. Day 5. What are the inhabitants? What happens on day 5, y'all?
Human. Fish.
No.
Birds.
Fish and birds. Water creatures, air creatures. Or water creatures, creatures that fly along the face of the Shemayim.
Yeah.
That or the Rakia, that border, that
man.
solid border. They fly on the face of it. So watch. 2 spaces, 2 inhabitants. What are the actions? This one's interesting. They share it with humans. What are they commanded?
Be fruitful and multiply.
Be fruitful and multiply. He'll say team. He'll actually use weird verbs too. Be fruitful and multiply and move in the space. He'll use words like team. Like, do you understand the word team? To team? Not a team like a noun, but to team, to flood and fill, the way fish do, the way birds do. Okay? And there we have it again, these three. Yes, sir?
What was that thing that the birds flew over?
They don't fly over it, they fly under it, on the face of it. It's called the Rakia or the Shemayim. The Israelites believed the sky was solid. And they believed above that solid sky was a cosmic ocean called the Tehom. Yeah. So the birds have their space that's created for them, and they're the inhabitant, right? And they have to navigate in that space and be fruitful and multiply. What's interesting is God even gives, let's go back to the sun, the moon, and the stars. He literally, what is their action? You know what's weird? Mimshelet. Their action is to govern. They have an authoritative position. They're to govern. Does that make sense? They're to govern the day and the night. Rule it. They have an action that's intended. Okay? When we can move ahead to day 3. Let's look at day 3. What's the space made in day 3?
Land.
Yes. It corresponds. So day 3 is, remember, day 3, the land emerges and vegetation comes up on it. And then day 6, it's the creatures of the land. The creatures that live on the arts, the creatures that live there. And they have an action. Be fruitful, multiply. Not team, but slither, move, okay? All these kinds of things. And then mankind, Adam, male and female, Adam, okay? It's Adam. And Adam is the way that people say it in English, but Adam's helpful because we hear Adam, we think first an individual person with a name, but in Hebrew it says, I made Adam male and female. Okay, so not an individual person, otherwise we're quite confused here. All right, so it's humanity. All right, so Adam. Adam is made. And here's what's interesting about Adam. Let's think about that. What space is there prepared for Adam?
Garden,
The
right?
garden.
Ends up being the garden. Now one isn't going to tell you that. One is going to say, take dominion over the entirety of the earth, but also over all the creatures and all the spaces. Okay? Now, we will get more information in chapter 2. From what is your base of operations? What's the place that you start? What actions will you take to accomplish this mandate, this Torah, these commands, these actions, okay? How will you start these actions and bring them to life? We know in chapter 2, specifically, all of the space is granted them in terms of dominion, but the way that they are to take dominion is God creates a special space for them, the garden. They occupy that special space in the garden, and their job is to expand it. The garden is temple. Their job is to make the rest of the earth like the garden. Their job is to expand garden. All right? Now, it was God's invention, it was God's intention, it was God's idea, it was God's original plan. God planted a garden in the east. And then he brought man to it and said, see this work that I've done? Join me in it, expand it, be here. Work this garden. So he has a specific, man has specific action. And actually it gets really clear for us, right? The idea that the actions man is supposed to take as an inhabitant of the space God's allotted for him makes sense. We would call that Torah. That is all that that's all that humans are required to do. That's a way to say all of our required actions within an arrangement. Within the arrangement of I'm an actor that's been put in a specific space that God has given to me, what actions do I take? I could just call that Torah. All the actions I can take are Torah. Why? What does Torah mean?
Instruction.
Instruction. It's instructions. That's all it is. Here's the things you do in the space, right? Which is helpful to translate Torah as instruction, because that really is how you should translate it. It's very unfortunate that it was shifted in Greek to nomos, which is law, and then in English, law. We hear law and we think something very different than when we hear instruction, you know? And we also, when we hear law, we think prohibition, like bad things. don't do the bad things.
Right.
We don't hear, here's the stuff you do. Right? Like, take, for example, our legislation. Our legislation doesn't tell you what to do on the sidewalk. Our legislation tells you what not to do on the sidewalk. Don't spit. Don't let your dogs poop on it. Don't publicly urinate. Okay? But if you fall outside of the bounds of the negative stuff, nobody's telling me what to do on the sidewalk. Okay? The Torah doesn't work like that. The Torah focuses primarily on do these actions. Okay? And when it does prohibit us, it says don't get tangled up in these actions because you're supposed to do these actions. If you do these other negative actions, okay, it's going to stop you from doing what I put you here to do. Very different, much more holistic. Yeah.
Are commandments different from instruction? I mean,
Commandments are going to be, I think, okay, this is where the metaphor for Legos comes in. Let's imagine that all of Torah is a giant Lego creation. We won't say what the shape is right now.
Farm.
Okay?
I built a big Lego farm before.
I'll say a temple, but we don't know right now. We don't know what the shape is. We're gonna imagine that it's built. You can say that commands are, do you know any specific names of Legos? Like specific types? So for example, there'll be ones with 6, there'll be ones that are individual ones that are
1 by 2 pieces.
2 thick. Yeah, 1 by 2 pieces, this kinds of,
3
do
by
you understand?
1 by 1 hinges, which is actually my favorite.
Right, so we've got hinges, okay, you have different Lego pieces. Commands are going to be subunits in this big thing called Torah. They're one of the things that's inside Torah.
Right.
A mitzvah, a command. Okay? Also, you have pikudim, like ordinances, boundaries. You have some mitzvah, pikudim, devarim, words. You have, what's the word here? Edut, testimonies. Okay, all these things together will make this big, larger thing called Torah. Torah. Now, what's interesting is what word could we use to describe this whole thing? This idea that God would say, here's a space, you're an actor, here's what you do in this space. And what would we label this whole arrangement? What word could we use to label this whole arrangement? It rhymes with smovenant.
covenant.
Yeah! All right, that's great. You're on it. All right. So,
Knew it.
I knew that. I was on it.
Yeah, I was gonna say it, but you rhymed it.
Schmishmortion.
Yeah. Covenant.
Smovenant.
Covenant. Okay. So a covenant is this. It's a word that says God is in charge of the creation of this space. And you have a unique relationship to him as an actor who has created the space, who owns the space, who is telling you how to navigate it, and who has given your identity within that space. Okay? Yeah.
Is there covenant without Torah?
No! That's really great. Is there covenant without instruction? No! That's not true. Yes, there is. There are covenants without instruction.
Yeah. Did Torah need to come because of?
This is a great question. Yeah. There are covenants without Torah. I'm sorry, yeah. And those are the best kinds of covenants.
Mm-hmm.
They're called promissory covenants. Promissory covenants, okay? The any kind of king-vassal covenant is going to be a Torah covenant, meaning as a king, I'll give you these benefits as my vassal, which is like my underling, my dude who's devoted to me. You'll give me these benefits, and we'll share the space together and navigate it according to quid pro quo. I do these things, you do those things, and it works. A promissory covenant, though, is where a hierarch goes to someone who's beneath them. Somebody higher up, they go to somebody lower, and they say, I am going to give you these perks and benefits regardless. It's my word. I put myself on the hook for these things being performed. Okay? And the irony is the first thing that happened was a promissory covenant. Okay? And the thing that follows is always the Torah, a king-vassal covenant. I would argue as an example of this that the blessing that's over humanity is a promissory covenant.
Yeah.
Even because of the word bless and how it's going to correlate to what happens with Abraham. Okay? And then the arrangement in the garden, do not eat from the tree that's in the center, okay, is a king-vassal covenant built on top of it. Does that make sense? And the reason it's built on top of it is this. When somebody screws up the king-vassal covenant, what's underneath it? That promise.
Yeah.
And he's always going to build on that promise.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and he might extend the promise, right? So it's extended from Adam 10 generations later to Noah, and then it's extended from Noah 10 generations later to Abraham. So there's a promise, a promissory covenant. Absolutely, you can have a covenant without Torah associated with it. You're going to end up, though, that eventually all promissory covenants have laid on top of them a kind of, this is how we navigate in this new space, and that's going to have Torah. So Torah will always be there.
Right.
Yeah, God will say, I'm committed to you as my imagers, and my word over you is you're going to have dominion over this space, and you're going to be blessed.
Right.
Now, here's how we go about doing that. Torah. Okay, you're always going to have that. Because otherwise, if God just had promises that were going to come no matter what, then we would actually not be made in his image because we wouldn't be making choices. The reason that Torah exists for us, is because choice. We must make a choice, life or death. Life or death.
Yeah.
Yahweh, not Yahweh. Sorry, we're not robots. We're not robots. We're not like this. I can't say the name of the camera because it will turn off, but we're not like this.
We are not.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, I think this is a helpful little nugget. I think I'm gonna stop it and start another segment here. GoPro, stop recording.